Letter 31 of Letters from Egypt by Lady Lucie Duff-Gordon. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. To Sir Alexander Duff-Gordon, Luxor, February 12, 1864. Dearest Alick, we are in Ramadan now, and Omar really enjoys a good opportunity of making his soul. He fasts and washes vigorously, prays his 5 times a day, goes to mosque on Fridays, and is quite merry over it, and ready to cook infidels' dinners with exemplary good humour. It is a great merit in Muslims that they are not at all grumpy over their piety. The weather has set in since 5 or 6 days like a paradise. I sit on my lofty balcony and drink the sweet northerly breeze, and look at the glorious mountain opposite, and think if only you and the chicks were here it would be the best o' life. The beauty of Egypt grows on one, and I think it far more lovely this year than I did last. My great friend the Maōhn, he is not the Nazir, who is a fat little pig-eyed jolly Turk, lives in a house which also has a superb view in another direction, and I often go and sit on the bench, i.e. the mastaba in front of his house, and do what little talk I can and see the people come with their grievances. I don't understand much of what goes on, as the patois is broad and doubles the difficulty, or I would send you a Theban police report. But the Maōhn is very pleasant in his manner to them, and they don't seem frightened. We have appointed a very small boy our bawab or porter, or rather he is appointed himself, and his assumption of dignity is quite delicious. He has provided himself with a huge staff, and he behaves like the most tremendous janissary. He is about Rainie's size, as sharp as a needle, and possesses the remains of a brown shirt and a ragged kitchen duster as a turban. I am very fond of little Achmet, and I like to see him doing the tableaux vivants from Murillo with a plate of broken victuals. The children of this place have become so insufferable about baksheesh that I have complained to the Maōhn, and he will assemble a committee of parents and enforce better manners. It is only here and just where the English go. When I ride into the little villages I never hear the word, but I am always offered milk to drink. I have taken it 2 or 3 times and not offered to pay, and the people always seem quite pleased. Yesterday Sheykh Yussuf came again, the first time since his brother's death. He was evidently deeply affected, but spoke in the usual way. It is the will of God, we all must die, etc. I wish you could see Sheykh Yussuf. I think he is the sweetest creature in look and manner I ever beheld, so refined and so simple, and with the animal grace of a gazelle. A high-bred Arab is as graceful as an Indian, but quite without the feline Gesmeidigkeit or the look of dissimulation. The eye is as clear and frank as a child's. Mr. Rückel, the Austrian consul here, who knows Egypt and Arabia well, tells me he thinks many of them quite as good as they look, and said of Sheykh Yussuf, ist so gemütlich. There is a German here deciphering hieroglyphics, Herr Dummerkin, a very agreeable man, but he has gone across the river to live at El Kerna. He has been through Ethiopia in search of temples and inscriptions. I am to go over and visit him, and see some of the tombs again in his company, which I shall enjoy, as a good interpreter is sadly wanted in those mysterious regions. My chest is wonderfully better these last 6 or 7 days. It is quite clear that downright heat is what does me good. Moreover, I have just heard from M. Meunier that a good donkey is en route and on a boat from El Montana. He will cost me between £4 and £5, and will enable me to be about far more than I can by merely borrowing Mustapha's horse, about which I have scruples as he lends it to other lady travellers. Little Achmet will be my sais as well as my doorkeeper, I suppose. I wish you would speak to Layard in behalf of Mustapha Aga. He has acted as English consul here for something like 30 years, and he really is the slave of travellers. He gives them dinners, mounts them, and does all the disagreeable business of wrangling with the rais and dragomans for them, makes himself a postmaster, takes care of their letters and sends them out to the boats, and does all manner of services for them, and lends his house for the infidels to pray in on Sunday when a clergyman is here. For this he has no remuneration at all, except such presents as the English see fit to make him, and I have seen enough to know that they are neither large nor always gracefully given. The old fellow at Keneh who has nothing to do gets regular pay, and I think Mustapha ought to have something. He is now old and rather infirm, and has to keep a clerk to help him. At least his expenses should be covered. Please say this to Layard from me as my message to him. Don't forget it, please, for Mustapha is a really kind friend to me at all times and in all ways. February 14th. Yesterday we had a dust storm off the desert. It made my head heavy and made me feel languid, but did not affect my chest at all. To-day is a soft grey day. There was a little thunder this morning and a few, very few, drops of rain, hardly enough for even Herodotus to consider portentous. My donkey came down last night, and I tried him to-day, and he is very satisfactory, though alarmingly small, as the real Egyptian donkey always is. The big ones are from the Hejaz. But it is wonderful how the little creatures run along under one as easily as possible, and they have no will of their own. I rode mine out to Karnak and back, and he did not seem to think me at all heavy. When they are overworked and over-galloped, they become bad on the legs and easily fall, and all those for hire are quite stumped up, poor beasts. They are so willing and docile that everyone overdrives them. End of Letter 31. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. Of Letters from Egypt by Lady Lucie Duff-Gordon. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. To Mrs. Austen, Luxor, February 19, 1864. Dearest Mother, I have only time for a few lines to go down by Mr. Strutt and Heathcote's boat to Cairo. They are very good specimens and quite recognized as belonging to the higher people, because they do not make themselves big. I received your letter of January 21st, with little darling Rainey's 3 days ago. I am better now that the weather is fine again. We had a whole day's rain, which Herodotus says is a portent here, and a hurricane from the south worthy of the Cape. I thought we should have been buried under the drifting sand. To-day is again heavenly. I saw Abd el-Aziz, the chemist in Cairo. He seemed a very good fellow, and was a pupil of my old friend Monsieur Chevreul, and highly recommended by him. Here I am out of all European ideas. The Sheykh el Arab, of the Abada tribe, who has a sort of town house here, has invited me out into the desert to the black tents, and I intend to pay a visit with old Mustapha Aga. There is a Roman well in his yard with a ghoul in it. I can't get the story from Mustapha, who is ashamed of such superstitions, but I'll find it out. We had a fantasia at Mustapha's for young Strutt and company, and a very good dancing girl. Some dear old prosy English people made me laugh so. The lady wondered how the women here could wear clothes so different from English females, poor things. But they were not malveillants, only pitying and wonderstruck. Nothing astonished them so much as my salutations with Salim Effendi, the Maoun. I begin to feel the time before me to be away from you all very long indeed. But I do think my best chance is a long spell of real heat. I have got through this winter without once catching cold at all to signify, and now the fine weather is come. I am writing in Arabic from Sheykh Yussuf's dictation the dear old story of the barber's brother with the basket of glass. The Arabs are so diverted at hearing that we all know the Alf Layla o Layla, the 1,000 Nights and a Night. The want of a dictionary with a teacher knowing no word of English is terrible. I don't know how I learn at all. The post is pretty quick up to here. I got your letter within 3 weeks, you see, but I get no newspapers. The post is all on foot, and can't carry anything so heavy. One of my men of last year, Asgalani the steersman, has just been to see me. He says his journey was happier last year. I hear that Phillips is coming to Cairo, and have written to him there to invite him up here to paint these handsome Saidis. He could get up in a steamer as I did, through Hassanain Effendi, for a trifle. I wish you could come, but the heat here which gives me life would be quite impossible to you. The thermometer in the cold antechamber is now 67 degrees where no sun ever comes, and the blaze of the sun is prodigious. End of Letter 32. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. Of Letters from Egypt by Lady Lucie Duff-Gordon. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. To Sir Alexander Duff-Gordon, Luxor, February 26, 1864. Dearest Alec, I have just received your letter of the 3rd instance, and I am glad to get such good tidings. You would be amused to see Omar bring me a letter and sit down on the floor till I tell him the family news, and then Alhamdulillah we are so pleased, and he goes off to his pots and pans again. Lord and Lady Spencer are here, and his sister, in 2 boats. The English milord, extinct on the continent, has revived in Egypt, and is greatly reverenced and usually much liked. These high English have mercy in their stomachs, said one of my last year's sailors, who came to kiss my hand, a pleasing fact in natural history. Fawahed Lord was little ragged Achmet's announcement of Lord Spencer, here's a lord. They are very pleasant people. I heard from Janet today of ice at Cairo and at Shubra and famine prices. I cannot attempt Cairo with meat at 1s. 3d a pound, and will e'en stay here and grill at Thebes. Marry come up with your Thebes and savagery. What if we do wear ragged brown shirts? 'Tis manners maketh man, and we defy you to show better breeding. We are now in the full enjoyment of summer weather. There has been no cold for fully a fortnight, and I am getting better every day now. My cough has quite subsided, and the pain in the chest much diminished. If the heat does not overpower me, I feel sure it will be very healing to my lungs. I sit out on my glorious balcony and drink the air from early morning till noon, when the sun comes upon it and drives me under cover. The thermometer has stood at 67 degrees for a fortnight or 3 weeks, rising sometimes to 67, but the people in the boats tell me it is still cold at night on the river. Up here, only a stone's throw from it, it is warm all night. I fear the loss of cattle has suspended irrigation to a fearful extent, and that the harvests of Lower Egypt of all kinds will be sadly scanty. The disease has not spread above Minia, or very slightly, but of course cattle will rise in price here also. Already food is getting dearer here. Meat is 4½ piastres, 7d. the rotil, a fraction less than a pound, and bread has risen considerably. I should say corn, for no bakers exist here. I pay a woman to grind and bake my wheat, which I buy, and delicious bread it is. It is impossible to say how exactly like the early parts of the Bible every act of life is here, and how totally new it seems when one reads it here. Old Jacob's speech to Pharaoh really made me laugh, don't be shocked, because it is so exactly what a fellah says to a pasha. Few and evil have been the days, etc., Jacob being a most prosperous man, but it is manners to say all that, and I feel quite kindly to Jacob, whom I used to think ungrateful and discontented, and when I go to Sidi Omar's farm, does he not say that, take now fine meal and bake cakes quickly, and wants to kill a kid? Fatira with plenty of butter is what the 3 men who came to Abraham ate, and the way that Abraham's chief memlook, acting as vakeel, manages Isaac's marriage with Rebekah. All the vulgarized associations with Puritanism and abominable little scripture tales and pictures peel off here, and the inimitably truthful representation of life and character, not a flattering one certainly, comes out, and it feels like Homer. Joseph's tears and his love for his brother born out of the same mother is so perfect. Only one sees what a bad inferior race the Beni Israel were compared to the Beni Ishmael or to the Egyptians. Leviticus and Deuteronomy are so very heathenish compared to the law of the Koran or to the early days of Abraham. Verily the ancient Jews were a foul nation, judging by the police regulations needful for them. Please don't make these remarks public, or I shall be burnt with Stanley and Colenso, unless I suffer Sheykh Yussuf to propose me el Islam. He and Monsieur de Rouget were here last evening, and we had an Arabic soirée. Monsieur de Rouget speaks admirably, quite like an Alim, and it was charming to see Sheykh Yussuf's pretty look of grateful pleasure at finding himself treated like a gentleman and a scholar by 2 such eminent Europeans. For I, as a woman, am quite as surprising as even Monsieur de Rouget's knowledge of hieroglyphics and Arabic Fusha. It is very interesting to see something of Arabs who have read and have the gentleman ideas. His brother, the Imam, has lost his wife. He was married 22 years, and won't hear of taking another. I was struck with the sympathy he expressed with the English Sultana, as all the uneducated people say, why doesn't she marry again? It is curious how refinement brings out the same feelings under all dispensations. I apologized to Yussuf for inadvertently returning the Salaam aleykum, peace be with thee, which he said to Omar, and which I, as an unbeliever, could not accept. He coloured crimson, touched my hand and kissed his own, quite distressed lest the distinction might wound me. When I think of a young parsonic prig at home I shudder at the difference. But Yussuf is superstitious. He told me how someone down the river cured his cattle with water poured over a mushaf, a copy of the Koran, and has hinted at writing out a chapter for me to wear as a hijab, an amulet for my health. He is interested in the antiquities and in M. de Rougé's work, and is quite up to the connection between ancient Egypt and the books of Moses, exaggerating the importance of Sayyidna Musa, of course. If I go down to Cairo again I will get letters to some of the Alim there from Abd el-Waris, the Imam here, and I shall see what no European but Lane has seen. I think things have altered since his day, and that men of that class would be less inaccessible than they were then, and then a woman who is old, Yussuf guessed me at 60, and educated does not shock, and does not interest them. All the Europeans here are traders, and only speak the vulgarest language, and don't care to know Arab gentlemen. If they see anything above their servants it is only Turks, or Arab merchants at times. Don't fancy that I can speak at all decently yet, but I understand a good deal, and stammer out a little. End of letter 33, read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. Of Letters from Egypt by Lady Lucie Duff-Gordon. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. To Mrs. Austen, Luxor, March 1st, 1864. Dearest Mutter, I think I shall have an opportunity of sending letters in a few days by a fast steamer, so I will begin one on the chance and send it by post if the steamer is delayed long. The glory of the climate now is beyond description, and I feel better every day. I go out early, at 7 or 8 o'clock, on my tiny black donkey, and come in to breakfast around 10, and then go out again about 4. I want to photograph Yussuf for you. The feelings and prejudices and ideas of a cultivated Arab, as I get at them little by little, are curious beyond compare. It won't do to generalize from one man, of course, but even one gives some very new ideas. The most striking thing is the sweetness and delicacy of feeling, the horror of hurting anyone. This must be individual, of course, it is too good to be general. I apologized to him 2 days ago for inadvertently answering the Salaam aleykum, which he of course said to Omar on coming in. Yesterday evening he walked in and startled me by a Salaam aleyki addressed to me. He had evidently been thinking it over whether he ought to say it to me, and come to the conclusion that it was not wrong. Surely it is well for all the creatures of God to speak Salaam, peace, to each other, said he. Now no uneducated Muslim would have arrived at such a conclusion. Omar would pray, work, lie, do anything for me, sacrifice money even, but I doubt whether he could utter Salaam aleykum to any but a Muslim. I answered as I felt, Peace, O my brother, and God bless thee. It was almost as if a Catholic priest had felt impelled by charity to offer the communion to a heretic. I observed that the story of the barber was new to him, and asked if he did not know the 1001 Nights. No, he studied only things of religion, no light amusements were proper for an alim, elder of religion. We Europeans did not know that, of course, as our religion was to enjoy ourselves, but he must not make merry with diversions, or music, or droll stories. See the mutual ignorance of all ascetics? He has a little girl of 6 or 7, and teaches her to write and to read. No one else, he believes, thinks of such a thing out of Cairo. There many of the daughters of the Alim learn, those who desire it. His wife died 2 years ago, and 6 months ago he married again a wife of 12 years old. Sheykh Yussuf is 30, he tells me. He looks 22 or 23. What a stepmother and what a wife! He can repeat the whole Koran without a book. It takes 12 hours to do it. He has read the Torwat, Old Testament, and the El Anjil, Gospels, of course. Every Alim reads them. The words of Sayyidna Isa are the true faith, but Christians have altered and corrupted their meaning. So we Muslims believe. We are all the children of God. I asked if Muslims call themselves so, or only the slaves of God. "'Tis all one, children or slaves. Does not a good man care for both tenderly alike?" Pray observe the Oriental feeling here. Slave is a term of affection, not contempt, and remember the centurion's servant, slave, whom he loved. He had heard from Fadl Pasha how a cow was cured of the prevailing disease in Lower Egypt by water weighed against a mushaf, copy of the Koran, and had no doubt it was true. Fadl Pasha had tried it. Yet he thinks the Arab doctors no use at all who use verses of the Koran. Madame de Rouget, the great Egyptologue, came here one evening. He speaks Arab perfectly, and delighted Sheykh Yussuf, who was much interested in the translations of the hieroglyphics, and anxious to know if he had found anything about Musa, Moses, or Yussuf, Joseph. He looked pleased and grateful to be treated like a gentleman and a scholar by such an alim as M. de Rouget and such a sheykha as myself. As he acts as clerk to Mustapha, our consular agent, and wears a shabby old brown shirt, or gown, and speaks no English, I dare say he not seldom encounters great slights, from sheer ignorance. He produced a bit of old Kufic manuscript, and consulted M. de Rouget as to its meaning, a pretty little bit of flattery in an Arab alim to a Frenchman, to which the latter was not insensible, I saw. In answer to the invariable questions about all my family, I once told him my father had been a great alim of the law, and that my mother had got ready his written books and put some lectures in order to be printed. He was amazed, first, that I had a mother, as he told me he thought I was 50 or 60, and immensely delighted at the idea. "God has favoured your family with understanding and knowledge. I wish I could kiss the Sheykha your mother's hand. May God favour her." Maurice's portrait, as usual, he admired fervently, and said one saw his good qualities in his face, a compliment I could have fully returned, as he sat looking at the picture with an affectionate eye and praying, sotto voce, for El Gedda, El Gamil, the youth, the beautiful, in the words of the Fatah, "O give him guidance, and let him not stray into the paths of the rejected." Altogether, something in Sheykh Yussuf reminds me of Worsley. There is the same look of Céline Reinheit, with far less thought and intelligence. Indeed, little thought, of course, and an additional childlike innocence. I suppose some medieval monks may have had the same look, but no Catholic I have ever seen looked so peaceful or so unpretending. I see in him, like in all people who don't know what doubt means, that easy familiarity with religion. I hear him joke with Omar about Ramadan, and even about Omar's assiduous prayers, and he is a frequent and hearty laugher. I wonder whether this gives you any idea of a character new to you. It is so impossible to describe manner which gives so much of the impression of novelty. My conclusion is the heretical one, that to dream of converting here is absurd, and I will add, wrong. All that is wanted is general knowledge and education, and the religion will clear and develop itself. The elements are identical with those of Christianity, unencumbered, as that has been, with asceticism and intolerance. On the other hand, the creed is simple and there are no priests, a decided advantage. I think the faith has remained wonderfully rational considering the extreme ignorance of those who hold it. I will add Sally's practical remark that the prayers are a fine thing for lazy people, they must wash first, and the prayer is a capital drill. You would be amazed to hear Sally when Omar does not wake in time to wash, pray, and eat before daybreak now in Ramadan. She knocks at his door and acts as a muezzin. "Come, Omar, get up and pray and have your dinner. The evening meal is breakfast, and the early morning one dinner." Being a light sleeper, she hears the muezzin, which Omar often does not, and passes on "the prayers is better than sleep" in a prose version. Ramadan is a dreadful business, everybody is cross and lazy, no wonder. The camelmen quarrelled all day under my window yesterday, and I asked what it was all about. "All about nothing, it is Ramadan with them," said Omar, laughing. "I want to quarrel with someone myself, it is hot to-day and thirsty weather. Moreover, I think it injures the health of numbers permanently, but of course it is the thing of most importance in the eyes of the people. There are many who never pray at ordinary times, but few fail to keep Ramadan. It answers to the Scotch Sabbath, a comparison also borrowed from Sally. Friday. My friend Salim Effendi has just been here talking about his own affairs and a good deal of theology. He is an immense talker, and I just put iwas, yes, and la, no, and sahi, very true, and learn manners and customs. He tells me he has just bought 2 black slave women, mother and daughter, from a Copt for about £35 the 2. The mother is a good cook, and the daughter is for his bed, as his wife does not like to leave Cairo and her boys at school there. It does give one a sort of start to hear a most respectable magistrate tell one such a domestic arrangement. He added that it would not interfere with the Sitt el Kabir, the great lady, the black girl being only a slave, and these people never think they have children enough. Moreover, he said he could not get on with his small pay without having women to keep house, which is quite true here, and women are not respectable in a man's house on other terms. Salim has a high reputation, and is said not to eat the people. He is a hot Mussulman, and held forth very much as a very superficial Unitarian might do, evidently feeling considerable contempt for the absurdities, as he thinks him, of the Copts. He was too civil to say Christians, but no hatred, and he is known to show no partiality, only he can't understand how people can believe such nonsense. He is a good specimen of the good, honest, steady-going man of the world Muslim, a strong contrast to the tender piety of dear Sheykh Yussuf, who has all the feelings which we call Christian charity in the highest degree, and whose face is like that of the beloved disciple, but has no inclination for doctrinal harangues like worthy Salim. There is a very general idea among the Arabs that Christians hate the Muslims. They attribute to us the old crusading spirit. It is only lately that Omar has let us see him at prayer, for fear of being ridiculed, but now he is sure that is not so. I often find him praying in the room where Sally sits at work, which is a clean, quiet place. Yussuf went and joined him there yesterday evening, and prayed with him, and gave him some religious instruction quite undisturbed by Sally and her needlework, and I am continually complimented on not hating the Muslims. Yussuf promises me letters to some alim in Cairo when I go there again, that I might be shown the Azhar, the great college. Omar had told him that I refused to go with a janissary from the consul for fear of giving offence to any very strict Muslims, which astonished him much. He says his friends shall dress me in their women's clothes and take me in. I asked whether as a concealment of my religion, and he said no, only there were thousands of young men, and it would be more delicate that they should not stare and talk about my face. Salim told me a very pretty grammatical quibble about son and prophet, apropos of Christ, on a verse in the Gospel, depending on the reduplicative sign, shedda, over one letter. He was just as put out when I reminded him that it was written in Greek, as our amateur theologians are if you say the Bible was not originally composed in English. However, I told him that many Christians in England, Germany, and America did not believe that Sayyidina Isa was God, but only the greatest of prophets and teachers, and that I myself was of that opinion. He at once declared that that was sufficient, and that all such had received guidance, and were not among the rejected. How could they be, since Christians only believed the teachings of Isa, which was true, and not the falsifications of the priests and bishops? The bishops always catch it, as schoolboys say. I was curious to hear whether on the strength of this he would let out any further intolerance against the Copts, but he said far less, and far less bitterly than I have heard from Unitarians, and debited the usual most commonplace, common-sense kind of arguments on the subject. I fancy it would not be very palatable to many Unitarians to be claimed mir nix der nichts as followers of Islam, but if people really wish to convert in the sense of improving, that door is open, and no other. Monday, the 7th. The steamer has come down already, and will, I suppose, go on to-morrow, so I must finish this letter to go by it. I have not received any letter for some time, and am anxiously expecting the post. We have now settled into quite warm weather ways, no more going out at midday. It is now broiling, and I have been watching 8 tall fine blacks swimming and capering about, their skins shining like otter's fur when wet. They belong to a galab, a slave dealer's boat. The beautiful thing is to see the men and boys at work among the green corn, the men half naked and the boys wholly so. In the sun their brown skins look just like dark clouded amber, semi-transparent, so fine are they. I rejoice to say that on Wednesday is Bairam, and tomorrow Ramadan dies. Omar is very thin and yellow and headachy, and everyone is cross. How I wish I were going, instead of my letter, to see you all, but it is evident that this heat is the thing that does me good, if anything will. End of Letter 34. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. Of Letters from Egypt by Lady Lucie Duff-Gordon. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. To Sir Alexander Duff-Gordon, Luxor, March 7, 1864. Dearest Alick, the real hot weather, speaking after the manner of the English, has begun, and the fine sun and clear air are delicious and reviving. My cough fades away, and my strength increases slowly. One can no longer go out in the middle of the day, and I mount my donkey early and late, with little Achmet trotting beside me. In the evenings comes my dear Sheykh Yussuf, and I blunder through an hour's dictation, and reading of the story of the barber's fifth brother, he with the basket of glass. I presume that Yussuf likes me too, for I am constantly greeted with immense cordiality by graceful men in green turbans, belonging, like him, to the Holy Family of Sheykh Abu el-Hajjaj. They inquire tenderly after my health, and pray for me, and hope I am going to stay among them. You would be much struck here with the resemblance to Spain, I think. Cosas de España is exactly the Shogel el Arab, and Don Fulano is the Arabic word Fulan, such a one, as Ojala is Inshallah, praise God. The music and dancing here, too, are Spanish, only more so, and much more. March 10, 1864. Yesterday was Bairam, and on Tuesday evening everybody who possessed a gun or a pistol banged away. Every drum and tarabuka was thumped, and all the children hollered, Ramadan mat! Ramadan mat! Ramadan's dead, about the streets. At daybreak Omar went to the early prayer, a special ceremony of the day. There were crowds of people, so, as it was useless to pray and preach in the mosque, Sheykh Yussuf went out upon a hillock in the burying ground, where they all prayed and he preached. Omar reported the sermon to me, as follows, it is all extempore. First Yussuf pointed to the graves, where are all those people? And to the ancient temples, where are those who built them? Do not strangers from a far country take away their corpses to wonder at? What did their splendour avail them, etc., etc. What then, O Muslims, will avail that you may be happy when that comes which will come for all? Truly God is just and will defraud no man, and he will reward you if you do what is right, and that is, to wrong no man, neither in person, nor in his family, nor in his possessions. Cease then to cheat one another, O men, and to be greedy, and do not think that you can make amends by afterwards giving alms, or praying, or fasting, or giving gifts to the servants of the mosques. Benefits come from God, it is enough for you if you do no injury to any man, and above all to any woman or little one. Of course it was much longer, but this was the substance, Omar tells me. Pretty sound morality too, methinks, and might be preached with one advantage to a meeting of philanthropists in Exeter Hall. There is no predestination in Islam, and every man will be judged upon his actions. Even unbelievers God will not defraud, says the Koran. Of course, a belief in meritorious work leads to the same sort of superstition as among Catholics, the endeavour to make one's soul by alms, fastings, endowments, etc. Therefore Yussuf's stress upon doing no evil seems to me very remarkable, and really profound. After the sermon, all the company assembled rushed on him to kiss his head, and his hands and his feet, and mobbed him so fearfully that he had to lay about him with the wooden sword which is carried by the officiating alim. He came to wish me the customary good wishes soon after, and looked very hot and tumbled, and laughed heartily about the awful kissing he had undergone. All the men embrace on meeting on the festival of Bairam. The kitchen is full of cakes, ring-shaped, which my friends have sent me, just as we see offered to the gods in the temples and tombs. I went to call on the Maōhn in the evening, and found a lot of people dressed in their best. Half were Copts, among them a very pleasing young priest who carried on a religious discussion with Seleem Effendi, strange to say, with perfect good humour on both sides. A Copt came up with his farm labourer, who had been beaten and the field robbed. The Copt stated the case in 10 words, and the Maōhn sent off his kavass with him to apprehend the accused persons, who were to be tried at sunrise and beaten, if found guilty, and forced to make good the damage. General Hay called yesterday, a fine old blue-eyed soldier. He found a lot of fellaheen sitting with me, enjoying coffee and pipes hugely, and they were much gratified at our pressing them not to move or disturb themselves, when they all started up in dismay at the entrance of such a grand-looking Englishman and got off the carpet. So we told them that in our country the business of a farmer was looked upon as very respectable, and that the General would ask his farmers to sit and drink wine with him. Mashallah Tayyib Katir, it is the will of God, and most excellent, said old Omar, my fellow friend, and kissed his hand to General Hay quite affectionately. We English are certainly liked here. Seleem said yesterday evening that he had often to do business with them, and found them always dogri, straight men, of one word and of no circumlocutions, and so unlike all the other Europeans, and especially the French. The fact is, that few but decent English come here. I fancy our scamps go to the colonies, whereas Egypt is the sink for all iniquity in the south of Europe. A worthy Copt here, one Todoros, took a piece of paper for £20 for antiquities sold to an Englishman, and after the Englishman was gone, brought it to me to ask what sort of paper it was, and how he could get it changed, or was he, perhaps, to keep it till the gentleman sent him the money? It was a circular note, which I had difficulty in explaining, but I offered to send it to Cairo to Briggs's and get it cashed. As to when he would get the money, I could not say, as they must wait for a safe hand to send gold by. I told him to put his name on the back of the note, and Todoros thought I wanted it as a receipt for the money which was yet to come, and was going cheerfully to write me a receipt for the £20 he was entrusting to me. Now a Copt is not at all green where his pocket is concerned, but they will take anything from the English. I do hope no swindler will find it out. Mr. Close told me that when his boat sank in the cataract, and he remained half dressed on the rock, without a farthing, 4 men came and offered to lend him anything. While I was in England last year, an Englishman to whom Omar acted as laquais de place went away owing him £7 for things bought. Omar had money enough to pay all the tradespeople, and kept it secret for fear any of the other Europeans should say, "Shame for the English," and did not even tell his family. Luckily the man sent the money by the next mail from Malta, and the Sheykh of the dragomans proclaimed it, and so Omar got it, but he would never have mentioned it else. This concealing of evil is considered very meritorious, and where women are concerned positively a religious duty. Le scandale est ce qui fait l'offense is very much the notion in Egypt, and I believe that very forgiving husbands are commoner here than elsewhere. The whole idea is found on the verse of the Koran, incessantly quoted, "The woman is made for the man, but the man is made for the woman," ergo, the obligations to chastity are equal, ergo, as the men find it difficult, they argue that the women do the same. I have never heard a woman's misconduct spoken of without 100 excuses. Perhaps her husband had slave girls, perhaps he was old or sick, or she didn't like him, or she couldn't help it. Violent love comes by the visitation of God, as our juries say, the man or woman must satisfy it or die. A poor young fellow is now in the Muristan, the madhouse, of Cairo, owing to the beauty and sweet tongue of an English lady whose servant he was. How could he help it? God sent the calamity. I often hear of Lady Ellenborough, who is married to the Sheykh el Arab of Palmyra, and lives at Damascus. The Arabs think it inhuman of English ladies to avoid her. Perhaps she has repented; at all events she is married and lives with her husband. I asked Omar if he would tell his brother if he saw his wife do anything wrong. N.B. He can't endure her. Certainly not, I must cover her with my cloak. I am told also that among the Arabs of the desert, the real Arabs, when a traveller, tired and wayworn, seeks their tents, it is the duty of his host, generally the Sheykh, to send him into the hareem, and leave him there 3 days, with full permission to do as he will after the women have bathed and rubbed and refreshed him. But he must never speak of that hareem; they are to him as his own, to be reverenced. If he spoke, the husband would kill him, but the Arab would never do it for a European, because all Europeans are so hard upon women, and do not fear God and conceal their offences. If a dancing girl repents, the most respectable man may and does marry her, and no one blames or laughs at him. I believe all this leads to a good deal of irregularity, but certainly the feeling is amiable. It is impossible to conceive how startling it is to a Christian to hear the rules of morality applied with perfect impartiality to both sexes, and to hear Arabs who know our manners talk of the English as being jealous and hard upon their women. Any unchastity is wrong and haram, unlawful, but equally so in men and women. Seleem Effendi talked in this strain, and seemed to incline to greater indulgence to women on the score of their ignorance and weakness. Remember, I only speak of Arabs. I believe the Turkish ideas are different, as is their whole harem system, and Egypt is not the rule for all Muslims. Saturday, the 12th. I dined last night with Mustapha, who again had the dancing girls for some Englishmen to see. Seleem Effendi got the doctor, who was of the party, to prescribe for him, and asked me to translate to him all about his old stomach as coolly as possible. He, as usual, sat by me on the divan, and during the pause in the dancing called El Maghribiya, the best dancer, to come and talk. She kissed my hand, sat on her heels before us, and at once laid aside the professional galliardise of manner, and talked very nicely in very good Arabic, and with perfect propriety, more like a man than a woman. She seemed very intelligent. What a thing we should think it for a worshipful magistrate to call up a girl of that character to talk to a lady! Yesterday we had a strange and unpleasant day's business. The evening before I had my pocket picked in Karnak by two men who hung about me, one to sell a bird, the other of the regular loafers, who hang about the ruins to beg, and sell water or curiosities, and who are all a lazy, bad lot, of course. I went to Seleem, who wrote at once to the Sheykh el Beled of Karnak to say that we should go over next morning at 8 o'clock to investigate the affair, and desire him to apprehend the men. Next morning Seleem fetched me, and Mustapha came to represent English interests, and as we rode out of Luxor the Sheykh el Arabda joined us, with 4 of his tribe with their long guns, and a lot more with lances. He was a volunteer, and furious at the idea of a lady and a stranger being robbed. It is the first time it has happened here, and the desire to beat was so strong that I went to act as consul for the prisoner. Every one was peculiarly savage that it should have happened to me, a person well known to be so friendly to el Muslimin. When we arrived we went into a square enclosure, with a sort of cloister on one side, spread with carpets where we sat, and the wretched fellows were brought in chains. To my horror I found that they had been beaten already. I remonstrated, "What if you had beaten the wrong men? Malaish! Never mind, we will beat the whole village until your purse is found." I said to Mustapha, "This won't do, you must stop this." So Mustapha ordained, with the concurrence of the Maōhn, that the Sheykh el Beled and the Gefiya, the keeper of the ruins, should pay me the value of the purse. As the people of Karnak are very troublesome in begging and worrying, I thought this would be a good lesson to the said Sheykh to keep better order, and I consented to receive the money, promising to return it and to give a Napoleon if ever the purse comes back with his contents, 3½ Napoleons. The Sheykh el Arabda harangued the people on their ill behaviour to Harimat, called them harami rascals, and was very high and mighty to the Sheykh el Beled. Hereupon I went away to visit a Turkish lady in the village, leaving Mustapha to settle. After I was gone they beat 8 or 10 of the boys who had mobbed me, and begged with the 2 men. Mustapha, who does not like the stick, stayed to see that they were not hurt, and so far it will be a good lesson to them. He also had the 2 men sent over to the prison here, for fear the Sheykh el Beled should beat them again, and will keep them here for a time. So far so good, but my fear now is that the innocent people will be squeezed to make up the money, if the men do not give up the purse. I have told Sheykh Yussuf to keep watch on how things go, and if the men persist in the theft and don't return the purse, I shall give the money to those whom the Sheykh el Beled will assuredly squeeze, or else to the mosque of Karnak. I cannot pocket it, though I thought it quite right to exact the fine as a warning to the Karnak mauvais sujets. As we went home, the Sheykh el Ababdeh, such a fine fellow he looks, came up and rode beside me, and said, "I know you are a person of kindness, do not tell this story in this country. If Effendina (Ismail Pasha) comes to hear, he may take a broom and sweep away the village." I exclaimed in horror, and Mustapha joined at once in the request, and said, "Do not tell anyone in Egypt. The Sheykh el Ababdeh is quite true, it may cost many lives." The whole thing distressed me horribly. If I had not been there they would have beaten right and left, and if I had shown any desire to have anyone punished, evidently they would have half killed the two men. Mustapha behaved extremely well. He showed sense, decision, and more feelings of humanity than I at all expected of him. Pray do as I begged you, try to get him paid. Some of the consuls in Cairo are barely civil, and old Mustapha has all the bother and work of the whole of the Nile boats, 85 this winter, and he is boundlessly kind and useful to the English, and a real protection against cheating, etc. End of Letter 35. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. 6 of Letters from Egypt by Lady Lucie Duff-Gordon. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. To Mr. Tom Taylor, March 16, 1864. Dear Tom, I cannot tell you how delighted I was to hear that all had gone well with Laura and your little daughter. Mashallah, God bless her. When I told Omar that a friend like my brother, as Arabs say, had got a baby, he proposed to illuminate our house and fire off all the pistols in the premises. Pray give my kind love and best wishes to Laura. I am living here a very quiet, dreamy sort of life in hot Thebes, visiting a little among my neighbours and learning a little Arabic from a most sweet, gentle young Sheykh who preaches on Fridays in the mosque of Luxor. I wish I could draw his soft brown face and graceful brown draped figure, but if I could he is too devout, I believe, to permit it. The police magistrate, El Mo'on Salim Effendi, is also a great friend of mine, and the Kadee is civil but a little scornful to heretical hareem, I think. It is already very hot, and the few remaining travellers' dahabiehs are now here on their way down the river. After that I shall not see a white face for many months, except Sally's. Sheykh Yussuf laughed so heartily over a print in an illustrated paper, from a picture of Hilton's, of Rebecca at the well, with the old vakeel of Sidi Ibrahim, Abraham's chief servant, kneeling before the girl he was sent to fetch like an old fool without his turban, and Rebecca and the other girls in queer fancy dresses, and the camels with snouts like pigs. If the painter could not go to Esh Sham, Syria, to see how the Arab Bedouin really look, said Sheykh Yussuf, why did he not paint a well in England with girls like English peasants? At least it would have looked natural to English people, and the vakeel would not seem so like a majnoon, a madman, if he had taken off a hat. I cordially agreed with Yussuf's art criticism. Fancy pictures of Eastern things are hopelessly absurd, and fancy poems too. I have got hold of a stray copy of Victor Hugo's Orientals, and I think I never laughed more in my life. The corn is now full-sized here, but still green. In 20 days will be harvest, and I am to go to the harvest home of a fellow friend of mine in a village a mile or two off. The crop is said to be unusually fine. Old Nile always pays back the damage he does when he rises so very high. The real disaster is the cattle disease, which still goes on I hear lower down. It has not at present spread above Minia, but the destruction has been fearful. I more and more feel the difficulty of quite understanding a people so unlike ourselves, the more I know them, I mean. One thing strikes me, that like children they are not conscious of the great gulf which divides educated Europeans from themselves, at least I believe it is so. We do not attempt to explain our ideas to them, but I cannot discover any such reticence in them. I wonder whether this has struck people who can talk fluently and know them better than I do. I find they appeal to my sympathy in trouble quite comfortably, and talk of religious and other feelings apparently as freely to each other. In many respects they are more unprejudiced than we are, and very intelligent, and very good in many ways, and yet they seem so strangely childish, and I fancy I detect that impression in even Lane's book, though he does not say so. If you write to me, dear Tom, please address me care of Briggs and Company, Cairo. I shall be so glad to hear of you and yours. Janet is going to England. I wish I were going too, but it is useless to keep trying a hopeless experiment. At present, I am very comfortable in health as long as I do nothing and the weather is warm. I suffer little pain, only I feel weak and weary. I have extensive practice in the doctoring line. Bad eyes, of course, abound. My love to Watts, and give greetings to any other of my friends. I grieve over Thackeray much, and more over his girls' lonely sort of position. I think you would enjoy, as I do, the peculiar sort of social equality which prevails here. It is the exact contrary of French égalité. There are the great and powerful people, much honoured, outwardly at all events, but nobody has inferiors. A man comes in and kisses my hand, and sits down off the carpet out of respect, but he smokes his pipe, drinks his coffee, laughs, talks, and asks questions as freely as if he were an effendi or I were a fellaha. He is not my inferior, he is my poor brother. The servants in my friends' house receive me with profound demonstrations of respect, and wait at dinner reverently, but they mix freely in the conversation, and take part in all amusements, music, dancing girls, or reading of the Koran. Even the dancing girl is not an outcast. She is free to talk to me, and it is highly irreligious to show any contempt or aversion. The rules of politeness are the same for all. The passer-by greets the one sitting still, or the one who comes into a room, those who are already there, without distinction of rank. When I have greeted the men they always rise, but if I pass without they take no notice of me. All this is very pleasant and graceful, though it is connected with much that is evil. The fact that any man may be a bey or a pasha to-morrow is not a good fact, for the promotion is more likely to fall on a bad slave than on a good or intelligent free man. Thus the only honourable class are those who have nothing to hope from the great, I won't say anything to fear, for all have cause for that. Hence the high respectability and gentility of the merchants, who are the most independent of the government. The English would be a little surprised at Arab judgments of them. They admire our veracity and honesty, and like us on the whole, but they blame the men for their conduct to women. They are shocked at the way Englishmen talk about hareem among themselves, and think the English hard and unkind to their wives, and to women in general. English haremat is generally highly approved, and an Arab thinks himself happy if he can marry an English girl. I have had an offer for Sally from the chief man here for his son, proposing to allow her a free exercise of her religion and customs as a matter of course. I think the influence of foreigners is much more real and much more useful on the Arabs than on the Turks, though the latter show it more in dress, etc. But all the engineers and physicians are Arabs, and very good ones too. Not a Turk has learnt anything practical, and the dragomans and servants employed by the English have learnt a strong appreciation of the value of a character for honesty, deserve it or no, but many do deserve it. Compared to the couriers and laquais de passe of Europe, these men stand very high. Omar has just run in to say a boat is going, so good-bye and God bless you. End of letter 36. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. Of Letters from Egypt by Lady Lucie Duff-Gordon. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. To Sir Alexander Duff-Gordon, Luxor, March 22, 1864. Dearest Alick, I am glad my letters amuse you. Sometimes I think they must breathe the unutterable dullness of Eastern life, not that it is dull to me, a curious spectator, but how the men with nothing to do can endure it is a wonder. I went yesterday to call on a Turk at Karnak. He is a gentlemanly man, the son of a former Mudir, who was murdered, I believe, for his cruelty and extortion. He has 1,000 feddans, acres or a little more, of land, and lives in a mud house, larger but no better than any fellah's, with 2 wives and the brother of one of them. He leaves the farm to his fellaheen altogether, I fancy. There was one book, a Turkish one, I could not read the title page, and he did not tell me what it was. In short, there was no means of killing time but the nargile, no horse, no gun, nothing, and yet they did not seem bored. The two women are always clamorous for my visits, and very noisy and schoolgirlish, but apparently excellent friends and very good natured. The gentleman gave me a kufiyeh, thick head kerchief for the sun, so I took the ladies a bit of silk I happened to have. You never heard anything like his raptures over Maurice's portrait. Mashallah, mashallah, wahali zay ilward. It is the will of God, and by God he is like a rose. But I can't cotton to the Turks. I always feel that they secretly dislike us European women, though they profess huge admiration and pay personal compliments, which an Arab very seldom attempts. I heard Seleem Effendi and Omar discussing English ladies one day lately while I was inside the curtain with Seleem's slave girl, and they did not know I heard them. Omar described Janet, and was of the opinion that a man who was married to her could want nothing more. By my soul, she rides like a Bedawee, she shoots with the gun and pistol, and rows the boat, she speaks many languages, works with the needle like an Efreet, and to see her hands run over the teeth of the music box, keys of piano, amazes the mind, while her singing gladdens the soul. How then should her husband ever desire the coffee shop? Wallahi, she can always amuse him at home. And as to my lady, the thing is not that she does not know. When I feel my stomach tightened I go to the divan and say to her, "Do you want anything, a pipe or sherbet or so and so?" And I talk till she lays down her book and talks to me, and I question her and amuse my mind, and by God, if I were a rich man and could marry one English hareem like that, I would stand before her and serve her like a memlook. You see I am only this lady's servant, and I have not once sat in the coffee shop because of the sweetness of her tongue. Is it not therefore true that the man who can marry such hareem is rich more than with money? Seleem seemed disposed to think a little more of looks, though he quite agreed with all Omar's enthusiasm, and asked if Janet were beautiful. Omar answered with decorous vagueness that she was a moon, but declined mentioning her hair, eyes, etc. It is a liberty to describe a woman minutely. I nearly laughed out at hearing Omar relate his manoeuvres to make me amuse his mind. It seems I am in no danger of being discharged for being dull. The weather has set in so hot that I have shifted my quarters out of my fine room to the southwest, into one with only 3 sides, looking over a lovely green view to the northeast, with a huge sort of solid veranda, as large as the room itself, on the open side. Thus I live in the open air altogether. The bats and the swallows are quite sociable. I hope the serpents and scorpions will be more reserved. El Khamseen, the 50, has begun, and the wind is enough to mix up heaven and earth, but it is not distressing like the Cape southeaster, and, though hot, not choking like the Khamseen in Cairo and Alexandria. Mohammed brought me a handful of the new wheat just now. Think of harvest in March and April! These winds are as good for the crops here as a nice steady rain is in England. It is not necessary to water so much when the wind blows strong. As I rode through the green fields along the dyke, a little boy sang as he turned round on the musically creaking sakia, the water wheel turned by an ox, the one eternal sakia tune. The words are ad libitum, and my little friend chanted, "Turn, O sakia, to the right and turn to the left. Who will take care of me if my father dies? Turn, O sakia," etc. Pour water for the figs and the grass and for the watermelons. Turn, O sakia. Nothing is so pathetic as that sakia song. I passed the house of the Sheykh el Abab'deh, who called out to me to take coffee. The moon was splendid and the scene was lovely. The handsome black-brown Sheykh in dark robes and white turban, Omar in a graceful white gown and red turban, and the wild Abab'deh in all manner of dingy white rags, and with every kind of uncouth weapon, spears, matchlocks, etc., in every kind of wild and graceful attitude, with their long black ringlets and bare heads, a few little brown-black children quite naked and shaped like cupids. And there we sat and looked so romantic and talked quite like ladies and gentlemen about the merits of Sakna and Almas, the 2 great rival women singers of Cairo. I think the Sheykh wished to display his experiences of fashionable life. The Copts are now fasting and cross. They fast 55 days for Lent, no meat, fish, eggs or milk, no exception for Sundays, no food till after 12 at noon, and no intercourse with the hareem. The only comfort is lots of arrak, and what a Copt can carry decently is an unknown quantity. One seldom sees them drunk, but they imbibe awful quantities. They offer me wine and arrack always, and can't think why I don't drink it. I believe they suspect my Christianity in consequence of my preference for Nile water. As to that, though, they scorn all heretics, i.e. all Christians but themselves and the Abyssinians, more than they do the Muslims, and dislike them more. The procession of the Holy Ghost question divides us all with the gulf of Jehannam. The gardener of this house is a Copt, such a nice fellow, and he and Omar chaff one another about religion with the utmost good humour. Indeed, they are seldom touchy with the Muslims. There is a pretty little man called Michael, a Copt, vakeel to M. Mounier. I wish I could draw him to show a perfect specimen of the ancient Egyptian race. His blood must be quite unmixed. He came here yesterday to speak to Ali Bey, the Mudr of Keneh, who was visiting me, a splendid, handsome Turk he is, so little Michael crept in to mention his business under my protection, and a few more followed, till Ali Bey got tired of holding a durbar in my divan and went away to his boat. You see, the people think the Karbash is not quite so handy with an English spectator. The other day Mustapha Aga got Ali Bey to do a little job for him, to let the people in Gezira, the island, which is Mustapha's property, work at a canal there instead of at the canal higher up for the Pasha. Very well, but down comes the Nazir, the Mudir's sub, and Korbashes the whole Gezira, not Mustapha, of course, but the poor fellaheen who were doing his corvée instead of the Pasha's by the Mudir's order. I went to the Gezira, and thought that Moses was at work again, and had killed a firstborn in every house by the crying and wailing, when up came two fellows and showed me their bloody feet, which their wives were crying over, like for a death. Shorgel el Mizr, things of Egypt, like cosas d'Espagne. Last night I bored Sheykh Yussuf with Antara and Abu Zaid, maintaining the greater valour of Antara, who slew 10,000 for the love of Ibla. You know Antara. Yussuf looks down on such profanities, and replied, What are Antara and Abu Zaid compared to the combats of our Lord Moses with Og and other infidels of might? And what is the love of Antara for Ibla compared to that of our Lord Solomon for Balkis, Queen of Sheba, or their beauty and attractiveness to that of our Lord Joseph? And then he relayed the combat of Sayyidna Musa with Og, and I thought, Hear, O ye Puritans, and give ear, O ye Methodists, and learn how religion and romance are one to those whose manners and ideas are the manners and ideas of the Bible, and how Moses was not at all a crop-eared Puritan, but a gallant warrior. There is the Homeric element in the religion here. The prophet is a hero like Achilles, and like him directed by God, Allah instead of Athena. He fights, prays, teaches, makes love, and is truly a man, not an abstraction. And as to wonderful events, instead of telling one to gulp them down without looking, as children are told with a nasty dose, and as we are told about Genesis, etc., they believe them and delight in them, and tell them to amuse people. Such a piece of deep disguised scepticism as credo quia impossibile would find no favour here. What is impossible to God settles everything. In short, Mohammed has somehow left the stamp of romance on the religion, or else it is in the blood of people, though the Koran is prosy and commonsensical compared to the Old Testament. I used to think the Arabs intensely prosaic till I could understand a little of their language, but now I can trace the genealogy of Don Quixote straight up to some Sheykh el Arab. A fine handsome woman with a lovely baby came to me the other day. I played with the baby, and gave it a cotton handkerchief for its head. The woman came again yesterday to bring me a little milk and some salad as a present, and to tell my fortune with date stones. I laughed, and so she contented herself with telling Omar about his family, which he believed implicitly. She is a clever woman evidently, and a great sibyl here. No doubt she has faith in her own predictions. She told Madame Mounier, who is a Levantine, that she would never have a child, and was forbidden the house accordingly, and the prophecy has come true. Superstition is wonderfully infectious here. The fact is that the Arabs are so intensely impressionable, and so cowardly about inspiring any ill will, that if a man looks askance at them, it is enough to make them ill, and as calamities are not infrequent, there is always some mishap ready to be laid to the charge of somebody's eye. Omar would fain have had me say nothing about the theft of my purse, for fear the Karnak people should hate me and give me the eye. A part of the boasting about property, etc., is politeness, so that one may not be supposed to be envious of one's neighbour's nice things. My Sakka, water carrier, admired my bracelet yesterday, as he was watering the verandah floor, and instantly told me of all the gold necklaces and earrings he had bought for his wife and daughters, that I might not be uneasy and fear his envious eye. He is such a good fellow. For 2 shillings a month he brings up 8 or 10 huge skins of water from the river a day, and never begs or complains, always merry and civil. I shall enlarge his baksheesh. There are a lot of camels who sleep in the yard under my verandah; they are pretty and smell nice, but they growl and swear at night abominably. I wish I could draw you an Egyptian farm yard, men, women, and cattle, but what no one can draw is the amber light, so brilliant and so soft, not like the Cape Diamond sunshine at all, but equally beautiful, hotter, and less dazzling. There is no glare in Egypt like the south of France, and, I suppose, in Italy. Thursday. I went yesterday afternoon to the island again, to see the crops, and show Sally my friend farmer Omar's house and Mustapha's village. Of course we had to eat, and did not come home till the moon had long risen. Mustapha's brother, Abdulrahman, walked about with us, such a noble-looking man, tall, spare, dignified and active, grey-bearded and hard-featured, but as lithe and bright-eyed as a boy, scorning any conveyance but his own feet, and quite dry while we ran down. He was like Boaz, the wealthy gentleman peasant; nothing except the biblical characters give any idea of the rich fellah. We sat and drank new milk in a lodge in a garden of cucumbers (the lodge is a neat hut of palm branches), and saw the moon rise over the mountains and light up everything like a softer sun. Here you see all colours as well by moonlight as by day, hence it does not look as brilliant as the Cape moon, or even as I have seen in Paris, where it throws sharp black shadows and white light. The night here is a tender, subdued, dreamy sort of enchanted-looking day. My Turkish acquaintance from Karnak has just been here; he boasted of his house in Damascus, and invited me to go with him after the harvest here, also of his beautiful wife in Syria, and then begged me not to mention her to his wives here. It is very hot now; what will it be in June? It is now 86° in my shady room at noon; it will be hotter at 2 or 3. But the mornings and evenings are delicious. I am shedding my clothes by degrees; stockings are unbearable. Meanwhile my cough is almost gone, and the pain is quite gone. I feel much stronger too; the horrible feeling of exhaustion has left me; I suppose I must have salamander blood in my body to be made lively by such heat. Sally is quite well; she does not seem at all the worse at present. Saturday. This will go to-morrow by some travellers, the last winter swallows. We went together yesterday to the tombs of the kings on the opposite bank. The mountains were red hot, and the sun went down into Amenti all on fire. We met Mr. Dumichan, the German, who is living in the temple of Deir el Bahari, translating inscriptions, and went down Belzoni's tomb. Mr. Dumichan translated a great many things for us which were very curious, and I think I was more struck with the beauty of the drawing of the figures than last year. The face of the goddess of the western shore, Amenti, Athor or Hecate, is ravishing as she welcomes the king to her regions; death was never painted so lovely. The road is a long and most wild one, truly through the valley of the shadow of death, not an insect nor a bird. Our moonlight ride home was beyond belief beautiful. The Arabs who followed us were immensely amused at hearing me interpret between German and English, and at my speaking Arabic; they asked if I was dragoman of all the languages in the world. One of them had droll theories about Amalika, America, as they pronounce it always. Was the king very powerful that the country was called Al-Malika, the kings? I said, no, all are kings there; you would be a king like the rest. My friend disapproved utterly. If all are kings, then must be taking away every man the other's money; a delightful idea of the kingly vocation. When we landed on the opposite shore, I told little Achmet to go back in the ferry boat, in which he had brought me over my donkey, a quarter of an hour after I saw him by my side. The guide asked why he had not gone as I told him. Who would take care of the lady? The monkey is Rainie's size. Of course he got tired, and on the way home I told him to jump up behind me and crouper after the fellah fashion. I thought the Arabs would never have done laughing and saying Wallah and Mashallah. Sheykh Yussuf talked about the excavations, and is shocked at the way the mummies are kicked about. One boy told him they were not Muslims as an excuse, and he rebuked him severely, and told him it was haram, accursed, to do so to the children of Adam. He says they have learned it very much of Mariette Bey, but I suspect it was always so with the fellaheen. To-day a tremendous wind is blowing, excellent for the corn. At Mustapha's farm they are preparing for the harvest, baking bread and selecting a young bull to be killed for the reapers. It is not hot to-day, only 84 degrees in a cool room. The dust is horrid with this high wind, everything is gritty, and it obscures the sun. I am desired to eat a raw onion every day during the Khamseen for health and prosperity. This too must be a remnant of ancient Egypt. How I do long to see you and the children! Sometimes I feel rather downhearted, but it is no good to say all that, and I am much better and stronger. I stood a long ride and some scrambling quite well last evening. End of Letter 37. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. 38 of Letters from Egypt by Lady Lucie Duff-Gordon. Read for LibriVox.org into the public domain. To Sir Alexander Duff-Gordon, Luxor, April 6, 1864. Dearest Alick, I received yours of March 10th 2 days ago, one also from Hekekian Bey, much advising me to stay here the summer and get my disease evaporated. Since I last wrote the great heat abated, and now we have 76 to 80 degrees, with strong north breezes up the river, glorious weather, neither too hot nor chilly at any time. Last evening I went out to the threshing floor to see the stately oxen treading out the corn, and supped there with Abdurrahman on roasted corn, sour cream, and eggs, and saw the reapers take their wages, each a bundle of wheat according to the work he had done, the most lovely sight. The graceful, half-naked, brown figures loaded with sheaves, some had earned so much that their mothers or wives had to help carry it, and little fawn-like, stark-naked boys trudged off, so proud of their little bundles of wheat, or of hummuz, sort of vetch, much eaten both green and roasted. The Sakka water carrier, who has brought water for the men, gets a handful from each, and drives home his donkey with empty water-skins and a heavy load of wheat, and the barber who has shaved all these brown heads on credit this year gets his past pay, and everyone is cheerful and happy in their gentle, quiet way. Here is no beer to make men sweaty and noisy and vulgar. The harvest is the most exquisite pastoral you can conceive. The men work 7 hours in the day, i.e. 8, with half hours to rest and eat, and 7 more during the night. They go home at sunset to dinner, and sleep a bit, and then to work again, these lazy Arabs. The man who drives the oxen on the threshing floor gets a measure and a half for his day and night's work, of threshed corn I mean. As soon as the wheat, barley, adas, lentils, and hummuz are cut, we shall sow durra of 2 kinds, common maize and Egyptian, and plant sugar cane, and later cotton. The people work very hard, but here they eat well, and being paid in corn they get the advantage of the high price of corn this year. I told you how my purse had been stolen and the proceedings thereanent. Well, Mustapha asked me several times what I wished to be done with the thief, who spent 21 days here in irons. With my absurd English ideas of justice I refused to interfere at all, and Omar and I had quite a tiff because he wished me to say, "Oh, poor man, let him go, I leave the affair to God." I thought Omar absurd, but it was I who was wrong. The authorities concluded that it would oblige me very much if the poor devil were punished with a rigour beyond the law, and had not Sheykh Yussuf come and explained the nature of the proceedings, the man would have been sent up to the mines in Fazaglo for life, out of civility to me, by the Mudr of Keneh, Ali Bey. There was no alternative between my forgiving him for the love of God, or sending him to a certain death by a climate insupportable to these people. Mustapha and company tried hard to prevent Sheykh Yussuf from speaking to me, for fear I should be angry and complain at Cairo, if my vengeance were not wreaked on the thief, but he said he knew me better, and brought the procès verbal to show me. Fancy my dismay! I went to Seleem Effendi and to the Cadi with Sheykh Yussuf, and begged the man might be let go, and not sent to Keneh at all. Having settled this, I said that I had thought it right that the people of Karnac should pay the money I had lost, as a fine for their bad conduct to strangers, but that I did not require it for the sake of the money, which I would accordingly give to the poor of Luxor in the mosque and in the church. Great applause from the crowd. I asked how many were Mussulman and how many Nazranee, in order to divide the 3 napoleons and a half, according to the numbers. Sheykh Yussuf awarded 1 napoleon to the church, 2 to the mosque, and the half to the water drinking place, the Sabil, which was also applauded. I then said, "Shall we send the money to the bishop?" But a respectable elderly Copt said, "Malkish, never mind, better give it all to Sheykh Yussuf, he will send the bread to the church." Then the Cadi made me a fine speech, and said I had behaved like a great Emeerah, and one that feared God, and Sheykh Yussuf said that he knew the English had mercy in their stomachs, and that I especially had Mussulman feeling, as we say Christian charity. Did you ever hear of such a state of administration of justice? Of course, sympathy here, as in Ireland, is mostly with the poor man in prison, in trouble as we say. I find that accordingly a vast number of disputes are settled by private arbitration, and Yussuf is constantly sent for to decide between contending parties, who abide by his decision rather than go to law, or else 5 or 6 respectable men are called upon to form a sort of amateur jury, and to settle the matter. In a criminal case, if the prosecutor is powerful, he has it all his own way; if the prisoner can bribe high, he is apt to get off. All the appealing to my compassion was quite en règle, another trait of Egypt. The other day we found all our water jars empty and our house unsprinkled. On inquiry it turned out that the Sakkas had all run away, carrying with them their families and goods, and were gone no one knew whither, in consequence of some persons having authority, one, a Turkish cawass (policeman), having forced them to fetch water for building purposes at so low a price that they could not bear it. My poor Sakka is gone without a whole month's pay, 2 shillings, the highest pay by far given in Luxor. I am interested in another story. I hear that a plucky woman here has been to Keneh and threatened the Mudir that she will go to Cairo and complain to Effendina himself of the unfair drafting for soldiers, her only son taken while others have bribed off. She'll walk in this heat all the way, unless she succeeds in frightening the Mudir, which, as she is of the more spirited sex in this country, she may possibly do. You see these Saeedes are a bit less patient than Lower Egyptians. The Sakkas can strike, and a woman can face a Mudir. You would be amused at the bazaar here. There is a barber, and on Tuesdays some beads, calico and tobacco are sold. The only artisan is a jeweller. We spin and weave our own brown woolen garments, and have no other wants, but gold necklaces and nose and earrings are indispensable. It is the safest way of hoarding, and happily combines saving with ostentation. Can you imagine a house without beds, chairs, tables, cups, glasses, knives, in short, with nothing but an oven, a few pipkins and water jars, and a couple of wooden spoons, and some mats to sleep on? And yet people are happy and quite civilized who live so. An Arab cook, with his fingers and 1 cooking pot, will serve you an excellent dinner quite miraculously. The simplification of life possible in such a climate is not conceivable unless one has seen it. The Turkish ladies whom I visit at Karnak have very little more. They are very fond of me, and always want me to stay and sleep, but how could I sleep in my clothes on a mat divan, poor spoiled European that I am? But they pity and wonder far more at the absence of my master. I made a bad slip of the tongue and said my husband before Abul Rafia, the master of the house. The ladies laughed and blushed tremendously, and I felt very awkward, but they turned the tables on me in a few minutes by some questions they had asked quite coolly. I hardly know what I shall have to do. If the heat does not turn overpowering, I shall stay here. If I cannot bear it, I must go down the river. I asked Omar if he could bear a summer here, so dull for such a young man fond of a little coffee shop and gossip, for that if he could not, he might go down for a time and join me again, as I could manage with some man here. He absolutely cried, kissed my hands, and declared he was never so happy as with me, and he could not rest if he thought I had not all I wanted. I am your memlook, not your servant, your memlook. I really believe that these people sometimes love their English masters better than their own people. Omar certainly has shown the greatest fondness for me on all occasions. End of Letter 38. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. Of Letters from Egypt by Lady Lucie Duff-Gordon. Into the Public Domain. To Mrs. Ross, Luxor, April 7, 1864. Dearest Janet, I have continued very fairly well. We had great heat 10 days ago, now it is quite cool. Harvesting is going on, and I never did see in any dream so lovely a sight as the whole process. An acquaintance of mine, one Abdulrahman, is Boaz, and as I sat with him on the threshing floor and ate roasted corn, I felt quite puzzled as to whether I were really alive or only existing in an imagination in the Book of Ruth. It is such a kief that one enjoys under the palm trees, with such a scene. The harvest is magnificent here. I never saw such crops. There is no cattle disease, but a good deal of sickness among the people. I have to practice very extensively, and often feel very anxious, as I cannot refuse to go to the poor souls and give them medicine, with sore misgivings all the while. Fancy that Hekekian Bey can't get me an Arabic dictionary in Cairo! I must send to London, I suppose, which seems hardly worth while. I wish you could see my teacher, Sheykh Yussuf. I never before saw a pious person amiable and good like him. He is intensely devout, and not at all bigoted, a difficult combination, and moreover he is lovely to behold, and has the prettiest and merriest laugh possible. It is quite curious to see the mixture of a sort of learning with utter ignorance and great superstition, and such perfect high breeding and beauty of character. It is exactly like associating with St. John. I want dreadfully to be able to draw, or to photograph. The group at the Sheykh el Ababdah's last night was ravishing, all but my ugly hat and self. The black ringlets and dirty white drapery and obsolete weapons, the graceful, splendid Sheykh, black but beautiful like the Shalomite. I thought of Antar and Abu Zaid. Give my salam to Madame Tastu, and ask her whether I may stay on here, or if I go downstream during the heat whether I may return next winter, in which case I might leave some of my goods. Hekekian strongly advises me to remain here, and thinks the heat will be good. I will try. 88 degrees seem to agree with me wonderfully. My cough is better. End of Letter 39. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org. Letters from Egypt by Lady Lucie Duff-Gordon. Into the public domain. To Sir Alexander Duff-Gordon, Luxor, April 14, 1864. Dearest Alick, I have but this moment received your letter of the 18th March, which went after Janet, who was hunting at Tel el Kebir. We have had a tremendous Khamseen wind, and now a strong north wind, quite fresh and cool. The thermometer was 92 degrees during the Khamseen, but it did me no harm. Luckily I am very well, for I am worked hard, as a strange epidemic has broken out, and I am the Hakima (doctoress) of Luxor. The Hakim Pasha from Cairo came up and frightened the people, telling them it was catching, and Yussuf forgot his religion so far as to beg me not to be all day in the people's huts. But Omar and I despised the danger, I feeling sure it was not infectious, and Omar saying Min Allah. The people get stoppage of the bowels, and die in 8 days unless they are physicked. All who have sent for me in time have recovered. Alhamdulillah that I can help the poor souls. It is harvest, and the hard work, and the spell of intense heat, and the green corn, beans, etc., which they eat, brings on the sickness. Then the Copts are fasting from all animal food, and full of green beans and salad, and green corn. Mustapha tried to persuade me not to give physic, for fear those who died should pass for being poisoned, but Omar and I are sure it is only to excuse his own selfishness. Omar is an excellent assistant. The bishop tried to make money by hinting that if I forbade my patients to fast, I might pay for their indulgence. One poor, peevish little man refused the chicken broth, and told me that we Europeans had our heaven in this world. Omar let out kelb, dog, but I stopped him and said, "O my brother, God has made the Christians of England unlike those of Egypt, and surely will condemn neither of us on that account. Mayest thou find a better heaven hereafter than I now enjoy here." Omar threw his arms round me and said, "O thou good one, Surely our Lord will reward thee for acting thus with the meekness of a Muslimah and kissing the hand of him who strikes thy face. See how each religion claims humility. Suleyman was not pleased at his fellow Christians' display of charity. It does seem strange that the Copts of the lower class will not give us the blessing or thank God for our health like the Mussulman. Most of my patients are Christians, and some are very nice people indeed. The people here have named me Sitti, Lady, Noor ala Noor. A poor woman whose only child, a young man I was happy enough to cure when dreadfully ill, kissed my feet and asked by what name to pray for me. I told her my name meant Noor, light lux, but as that was one of the names of God I could not use it. Thy name is Noor ala Noor, said a man who was in the room. That means something like God is upon thy mind, or light from the light, and Noor ala Noor it remains, a combination of one of the names of God is quite proper, like Abdallah, Abdurrahman, etc. I begged some medicines from a Countess Braniski who went down the other day. When all is gone I don't know what I shall do. I am going to try to make castor oil, I don't know how but I shall try, and Omar fancies he can manage it. The cattle disease has also broken out desperately up in Esneh, and we see the dead beasts float down all day. Of course we shall soon have it here. Sunday, April 17th. The epidemic seems to be over, but there is still a great deal of gastric fever, etc. about. The Hakeem from Keneh has just been here, such a pleasing, clever young man, speaking Italian perfectly, and French extremely well. He is the son of some fellah of Lower Egypt, sent to study at Pisa, and has not lost the Arab gentility and elegance by a Frangee education. We fraternized greatly, and the young Hakeem was delighted at my love for his people and my high opinion of their intelligence. He is gone now to inspect the sick, and is to see me again and give me directions. He was very unhappy that he could not supply me with medicines, none are to be bought above Cairo except from the hospital doctors, who sell the medicines of the government as the Italian at Siout did. But Ali Effendi is too honest for that. The old bishop paid me a visit of 3½ hours yesterday, and pour me tirer une carotte he sent me a loaf of sugar, so I must send a present for the church to be consumed in raki. The old party was not very sober and asked for wine. I coolly told him it was haram forbidden to us to drink during the day, only with our dinner. I will never give the Christians drink here, and now they have left off pressing me to drink spirits at their houses. The bishop offered to alter the hour of prayer for me, and to let me into the Hekil, where women must not go, on Good Friday, which will be 18 days hence. All of which I refused, and said I would go on the roof of the church and look down through the windows with the other Harimat. Omar kissed the bishop's hand, and I said, "What, do you kiss his hand like a Copt?" "Oh yes, he is an old man, and a servant of my God, but dreadful dirty," added Omar, and it was too true. His presence diffused a fearful monastic odour of sanctity. A bishop must be a monk, as priests are married. Monday. To-day Ali Effendi el Hakeem came to tell me how he had been to try to see my patients and failed. All the families declared they were all well, and would not let him in. Such is the deep distrust of everything to do with the government. They all waited till he was gone away, and then came again to see me with their ailments. I scolded, and they all said, Wallah, ya Sid, ya Amira, that is the Hakeem Pasha, and he would send us off to hospital at Keneh, and then they would poison us. By thy eyes do not be angry with us, or leave off from having compassion on us on this account. I said, Ali Effendi is an Arab and a Muslim and an Emir (gentleman), and he gave me good advice, and would have given more, etc. No use at all. He is the government doctor, and they had rather die, and will swallow anything from El Sitti Noor ala Noor. Here is a pretty state of things. I gave Sheykh Yussuf £4 for 3 months' daily lessons last night, and had quite a contest to force it upon him. It is not for money, old lady, and he coloured crimson. He had been about with Ali Effendi, but could not get the people to see him. The Copts, I find, have a religious prejudice against him, and indeed against all heretics. They consider themselves and the Abyssinians as the only true believers. If they acknowledge us as brethren, it is for money. I speak only of the low class, and of the priests, of course the educated merchants are very different. I had a priest and 2 deacons, and the mother of one, here to day for physic for the woman. She was very pretty and pleasing, miserably reduced and weak from the long fast. I told her she must eat meat and drink a little wine and take cold baths, and gave her quinine. She will take the wine and the quinine, but neither eat nor wash. The bishop tells them they will die if they break the fast, and half the Christians are ill from it. One of the priests spoke a little English. He fabricates false antiques very cleverly, and is tolerably sharp. But, oh mon Dieu, it is enough to make one turn Muslim to compare these greasy rogues with such high-minded, charitable Sharifa noblemen as Abd el-Waris and Sheykh Yussuf. A sweet little Copt boy who is very ill will be killed by the stupid bigotry about the fast. My friend Suleiman is much put out, and backs my exhortations to the sick to break it. He is a capital fellow and very intelligent, and he and Omar are like brothers. It is the priests who do all they can to keep alive religious prejudice. Alhamdulillah, they are only partially successful. Mohammed has just heard that 75 head of cattle are dead at El Mantana. Here only a few have died as yet, and Ali Effendi thinks the disease less virulent than in Lower Egypt. I hope he is right, but dead beasts float down the river all day long. To turn to something more amusing, but please don't tell it, such a joke against my grey hairs. I have had a proposal, or at least an attempt at one. A very handsome Sheykh el Arab, Bedawi, was here for a bit, and asked Omar whether I were a widow or divorced, as in either case he would send a Dellala marriage brokeress to me. Omar told him that I would never do. I had a husband in England, besides I was not young, had a married daughter, my hair was grey, etc. The Sheykh swore he didn't care, I could dye my hair and get a divorce, that I was not like stupid modern women, but an ancient Arab Emira, and worthy of Antar or Abu Zaid, a woman for whom men killed each other or themselves, and he would pay all he could afford as my dowry. Omar came in fits of laughter at the idea, and the difficulty he had in stopping the Dellala's visit. He told the Sheykh I should certainly beat her, I should be so offended. The disregard of differences of age here on marriage is very strange. My adorer was not more than 30, I am sure. Don't tell people, my dear Alick, it is so very absurd, I should be ashamed before the people. Saturday, April 23rd. Alhamdulillah, the sickness is going off. I have just heard Suleiman's report as follows. Hassan Abu Achmet kisses the Emir's feet, and the bullets have cleaned his stomach 6 times, and he has said the Fatah for the lady. The 2 little girls who had diarrhea are well. The Christian dyer has vomited his powder and wants another. The mother of the Christian cook who married the priest's sister has got dysentery. The hareem of Mustapha Abu Abayed has 2 children with bad eyes. The bishop had a quarrel, and scolded and fell down, and cannot speak or move. I must go to him. The young deacon's jaundice is better. The slave girl of Khurshid Aga is sick, and Khurshid is sitting at her head in tears. The women say I must go to her too. Khurshid is a fine young Turk, and very good to his hareemat. That is all. Suleiman has got nothing on earth to do, and brings me a daily report. He likes the gossip and the importance. The Rais of a cargo boat brought me up your La Fontaine, and some papers and books from Hekekian Bay. Sheykh Yussuf is going down to Cairo, to try to get back some of the lands which Muhammad Ali took away from the mosques and the ulema without compensation. He asked me whether Ross would speak for him to Effendina. What are the Muslimin coming to? As soon as I can read enough he offers to read in the Koran with me, a most unusual proceeding, as the noble Koran is not generally put into the hands of heretics, but my charity to the people in sickness is looked upon by Abd el-Waris the Imam and by Yussuf as a proof that I have received direction, and I am one of those Christians of whom Sayyidna Mohammed, upon whose name be peace, has said that they have no pride, that they rival each other in good works, and that God will increase their reward. There is no arrière-pensée of conversation that they think hopeless, but charity covers all sins with Mussulman. Next Friday is the Jima el-Kebir, Good Friday with the Copts, and the prayers are in the daytime, so I shall go to the church. Next moon is the great Biram, el-Eid el-Kebir, the great festival with the Muslimin, the commemoration of the sacrifice of Isaac or Ishmael, commentators are uncertain which, and Omar will kill a sheep for the poor for the benefit of his baby, according to custom. I have at length compassed the destruction of mine enemy, though he has not written a book. A fanatical Christian dog, quadruped, belonging to the Coptic family who live on the opposite side of the yard, hated me with such virulent intensity that, not content with barking at me all day, he howled at me all night, even after I had put out the lantern and he could not see me in bed. Sentence of death has been recorded against him, as he could not be beaten into toleration. Mikael, his master's son, has come down from El Montana, where he is vakeel to M. Mounier. He gives a fearful account of the sickness there among men and cattle, 8 and 10 deaths a day; here we have had only 4 a day at the worst, in a population of I guess some 2,000. The Mouniers have put themselves in quarantine, and allow no one to approach their house, as Mustapha wanted me to do. 150 head of cattle have died at El Montana; here only a few calves are dead, but as yet no full-grown beasts, and the people are healthy again. I really think I did some service by not showing any fear, and Omar behaved manfully. By the by, will you find out whether a passaporto, as they call it, a paper granting British protection, can be granted in England? It is the object of Omar's highest ambition to belong as much as possible to the English, and feel safe from being forced to serve a Turk. If it can be done by any coaxing and jobbing, pray do it, for Omar deserves any service I can render him in return for all his devotion and fidelity. Some one tried to put it into his head that it was haram to be too fond of us heretics and be faithful, but he consulted Sheykh Yussuf, who promised him a reward hereafter for good conduct to me, and who told me of it as a good joke, adding that he was Raghil Amin, the highest praise for fidelity, the sobriquet of the Prophet. Do not be surprised at my lack of conscience in desiring to benefit my own follower in quelconque modo. Justice is not of Eastern growth, and Europeo is your only wear, and here it is only base not to stick by one's friends. Omar kisses the hands of the Sidi el Keber, the great master, and desires his best salaam to the little master and the little lady, whose servant he is. He asks if I, too, do not kiss Iskender Bey's hand in my letter, as I ought to do as his hareem, or whether I make myself big before my master, like some French ladies he has seen. I tell him I will do so if Iskender Bey will get him his warak paper, whereupon he picks up the hem of my gown and kisses that, and I civilly expostulate on such condescension to a woman. Yussuf is quite puzzled about European women, and a little shocked at the want of respect to their husbands they display. I told him that the outward respect shown to us by our men was our veil, and explained how superficial the difference was. He fancied that the law gave us the upper hand. Omar reports yesterday's sermon on toleration, it appears. Yussuf took the text of 'Thou shalt love thy brother as thyself, and never act towards him but as thou wouldst he would act towards thee.' I forget chapter and verse, but it seems he took the bull by the horns and declared all men to be brothers, not Muslimin only, and desired his congregation to look at the good deeds of others and not at their erroneous faith, for God is all-knowing, i.e. He only knows the heart, and if they saw aught amiss to remember that the best man need say Astaghfir Allah, I beg pardon of God 7 times a day. I wish the English could know how unpleasant and mischievous their manner of talking to their servants about religion is. Omar confided to me how bad it felt to be questioned, and then to see the Englishman laugh or put up his lip and say nothing. I don't want to talk about his religion at all, but if he talks about mine he ought to speak of his own too. You, my lady, say, when I tell you things, 'That is the same with us,' or 'That is different,' or 'good,' or 'not good' in your mind, and that is the proper way, not to look like thinking all nonsense." Esneh, Saturday, April 30th. On Thursday evening as I was dreamily sitting on my divan, who should walk in but Arthur Taylor, on his way, all alone in a big dahabieh, to Edfou. So I offered to go too, whereupon he said he would go to Assouan and see Philae as he had company, and we went off to Mustapha to make a bargain with his Rais for it. Thus then here we are at Esneh. I embarked on Wednesday evening, and we have been 2 days en route. Yesterday we had the thermometer at 110, I was the only person awake all day in the boat. Omar after cooking lay panting at my feet on the deck. Omar went fairly to bed in the cabin, ditto Sally. All the crew slept on the deck. Omar cooked amphibiously, bathing between every meal. The silence of noon with the white heat glowing on the river which flowed like liquid tin, and the silent Nubian rough boats floating down without a ripple, was magnificent and really awful. Not a breath of wind as we lay under the lofty bank. The Nile is not quite so low, and I see a very different scene from last year. People think us crazy to go up to Assouan in May. But I do enjoy it, and I really wanted to forget all the sickness and sorrow in which I have taken part. When I went to Mustapha's he said Sheykh Yussuf was ill, and I said then I won't go. But Yussuf came in with a sick headache only. Mustapha repeated my words to him, and I never did see such a lovely expression in a human face as that with which Yussuf said Ayah, sit. Mustapha laughed and told him to thank me, and Yussuf turned to me and said in a low voice, my sister does not need thanks, save from God. Fancy a Shereef, one of the Ulema, calling a Frengeya sister! His pretty little girl came in and played with me, and he offered her to me for Maurice. I cured Khurshid's Abyssinian slave girl. You would have laughed to see him obeying my directions, and wiping his eyes on his gold embroidered sleeve. And then the Coptic priest came to me for his wife who was ill. He was in a great quandary, because if she died he as a priest could never marry again, as he loudly lamented before her, but he was truly grieved, and I was very happy to leave her convalescent. Verily we are sorely visited. The dead cattle float down by thousands. M. Meunier buried 1,000 at El Montana alone, and lost 40 men. I would not have left Luxor, but there were no new cases for 4 days before, and the worst had been over for full 10 days. 2 or 3 poor people brought me new bread and vegetables to the boat when they saw me going, and Yussuf came down and sat with us all evening, and looked quite sad. Omar asked him why, and he said it made him think how it would seem when Inshallah should be well, and should leave my place empty at Luxor, and go back with the blessing of God to my own place and to my own people. Whereupon Omar grew quite sentimental too, and nearly cried. I don't know how Arthur would have managed without us, for he had come with 2 Frenchmen who had proper servants and who left the boat at Girgeh, and he has a wretched, little, dirty, idiotic Coptic tailor as a servant, who can't even sew on a button. It is becoming quite a calamity about servants here. Arthur tells me that men not fit to light Omar's pipe asked him £10 a month in Cairo and would not take less, and he gives his Copt £4. I really feel as if I were cheating Omar to let him stay on for £3, but if I say anything he kisses my hand and tells me not to be cross. I have letters from Yussuf to people at Assouan. If I want anything I am to call on the Kadee. We have a very excellent boat and a good crew, and are very comfortable. When the Luxor folk heard the son of my uncle was come, they thought it must be my husband. I was diverted at Omar's propriety. He pointed out to Mustapha and Yussuf how he was to sleep in the cabin between Arthur's and mine, which was considered quite satisfactorily apparently, and was looked upon as very proper of Omar to have arranged it so, as he had been sent to put the boat in order. Arthur has been all along the Suez Canal, and seen a great many curious things. The Delta must be very unlike Upper Egypt from all he tells me. The little troop of pilgrims for Mecca left Luxor about 10 days ago. It was a pretty and touching sight. 3 camels, 5 donkeys, and about 30 men and women, several with babies on their shoulders, all uttering the Zagharit cry of joy. They were to walk to Kozer, 8 days' journey with good camels, babies and all. It is the happiest day of their lives, they say, when they have scraped together money enough to make the Hajj. This minute a poor man is weeping beside our boat over a pretty heifer decked with many hagabs, amulets, which have not availed her against the sickness. It is heartrending to see the poor beasts and their unfortunate owners. Some dancing girls came to the boat just now for cigars, which Arthur had promised them, and to ask after their friend El Maghribiya, the good dancer at Luxor, whom they said was very ill. Omar did not know at all about her, and the girls seemed very much distressed. They were both very pretty, one an Abyssinian. I must leave off to send this to the post, it will cost a fortune, but you won't grudge it. End of Letter 40. Read by Sibella Denton. All LibriVox files are in the public domain. For more information, please visit LibriVox.org.